But the emphasis here on the second point, to let the word of Christ dwell in us richly, the emphasis here is on having a life of contacting the Lord as the Spirit in the word by exercising our spirit as we get into the word. So, of course, we need to read the Bible every day. We should try to read diligently. We should try to consistently read. Consistency is probably the most important thing in reading the Bible. But you also need to go further than that. You don't want to have the Bible just as a book of dead letters. We need to learn to exercise our spirit to pray read the word in a living way. So sometimes when I'm reading through the Bible, certain verses stand out to me. And sometimes I will stop and pray read them. That's actually a good practice, because you need to receive the Lord's living speaking. Sometimes, though, I just try to read through things and I try to keep track of the verses that stand out to me, and I pray read them later. But anyway, the point is that we need to muse on the word in our daily living. We need to read the word. We need to get into the word. We need to let the word get into us, and we need to muse on it. We need to consider it as we're doing our normal daily things, like when we're grinding at the mill and when we're in the field, when we're doing the dishes, when we're taking our kids to whatever events they need to go to. I spend a lot of time just driving kids around. Those are good times to try to turn to the Lord. And what are you going to do during those times? You can exercise your spirit to pray read the word. You can exercise your spirit to try to digest some of what you've read. So you can keep a few verses ready so that you have something to pray read. And also in this verse, you shouldn't neglect this. In this verse, it mentions singing the word. This is something which it's not an outward practice. We don't want to go away and try and make this into some kind of a practice, but this is something that happens spontaneously. We have a lot of scripture songs in our hymnal, and just especially among the young people, we have a lot of scripture songs. And a lot of times I find myself just singing these songs as I'm going about my daily life. And a lot of times the young people sing these songs, and it's a great way to get the word into you. We need to sing the word, not just by ourselves, but we need to sing to one another. It mentions that in that verse. It says, teaching and admonishing one another. That doesn't mean that we're going to go and try and teach somebody something. We're going to sing the song to them. My experience is like this. A lot of times I'll be here, some saints will be singing a song. Maybe it'll be my daughter, or maybe it'll be my wife, or anybody. And they're singing some sort of a scripture song. That scripture song, it gets into my being. And then I start to sing it. And then something of the word of Christ gets ministered into my being. The word of Christ becomes living to me, and it starts to saturate me. That needs to be our experience. We need to allow the word of Christ to become living to us. We need to allow it to saturate us in our daily living. We need to allow it to spread into every part of our being, in our mind, emotion, and will. And I think a lot of us, I'll be the first person to admit that I have a long way to go before this becomes my moment-by-moment daily living, but I'm learning, and we all need to learn. And I don't know if you have noticed this, but recently in a lot of the ministry that has been released, there's been a strong emphasis on prayer reading. And so, I'm learning to pray read the word. I'm learning every morning when I come to the Lord not to exercise my mind so much, but to just follow the Lord, to have a personal time with him, to listen to his voice. And a lot of times it really does help me to pray read some verses. Some saints have shared that they take a book of the Bible and they just pray read through it little by little. And I've done that before, and that is a really good way to get into the Word. And you don't have to think too much. You just get into the Word and you start to pray through it. Another thing that you can do, and this is more what I do now, is I just pay attention to certain verses that the Lord highlights to me, or that he brings up to me when I'm reading through the Bible, or certain verses that come up in my daily living. And I try to make a note of those. That way when I have an opportunity, I can just go back and I can start to pray with them to exercise my spirit. However we do it, there's no recipe book, except that we need to learn to exercise our spirit, to contact God as the Spirit, and to dig out the riches in the Word. And the thing is that we've heard this many times. I've heard about prayer reading since I came in the church life. But even though we've heard it many times, if we don't practice it, it's not going to profit us. So we need to try to build up a habit of really praying to contact the Lord as the Spirit in the Word by exercising our spirit. And as we practice this more and more, as we let the Word of Christ dwell in us richly in our daily living, we're going to be brought spontaneously into the God-man living, where Christ is our person. That's going to bring us into the reality of the one you make. Then when we gather together, there's not going to be the expression of the old man, but there's going to be a freshness. There's going to be a livingness. There's going to be a group of saints who are living Christ as the constituent of the new